Good evening, everybody. So welcome to Q&A. So I welcome you to have a word of prayer. Thank you. Our dear Lord, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for you've been with us since the morning programs up to this moment. We want to look for the answers that we have. How we ask that as we battle together, may we find the answers that we need as we move together in this journey. It's my prayer in Jesus' name. And so I think I remember around questions yesterday for those who are there. I was covering a fight against feminism, and I just remember two questions that I received. So I answer those two questions, and if there is more questions, you can ask. So I remember Brian's questions. And Terry's question and then James' question. So Brian's question was, we talked about trade weaving movement and their ideology. So is the trade weaving movement equals to cultural feminism? I'm a repair of feminism. That was not the question. You can repeat the question.
I had a thought that or rather it sounded to me as if it's a combination of both cultural feminism and liberal. So I wanted to figure
So should we call should we clarify them as both a combination of cultural and the repair of feminism? That's the question.
Yeah.
For me, I see the ideologies of repair and cultural, then the trade weaving movement, but I can't clarify them as neither cultural or a repair of feminism. That's the answer. I don't see them fitting the three groups of feminism. Though I see the similarities in the ideologies. Yeah. So I don't know either your thoughts. Yes, Rogers. Before Rogers, yes.
Okay, like I think this was largely informed by what I saw that they are trying to present these women who embrace trad. They try to embrace this idea of traditional, let me say, traditions, like in some manner, it is taking us back to traditions. And they are doing it in a way, that people would say it's a choice. Like they are trying to explore their choices, the freedom to make their own decisions on how they want to carry out their family matters. So largely what you will find them doing, and like you showed, they illustrate this trend mostly through social media, TikTok. So if you've ever landed on a video of a woman who's embracing this weaving, you will realize that they want to, as much as possible, display this form of traditional family values as much as possible in this video. But again, what really informs their this kind of a way of life is them having the idea that they have, as women, whatever choice they make is right, which we usually say is the main agenda in liberal feminism. So I realized they are misusing that freedom, but really they are using it to to uphold these traditions, this culture that there's differences in gender roles and gender different genders are supposed to present themselves in a different way. So that's what informed me think it's really a combination of liberal and cultural.
So maybe before I give Rogers to respond or maybe to make a comment, let me give an example or to reinforce the point I wanted to make. For example, when you look at the Republican Party or the Republican or the right wing, so we know when we talk about the Republican Party, it's not that they are against women working. So what they are doing is they want these women, yes, go and work, but no, you are wrong. The home, they're all be praised. So we don't praise those Republicans, don't see them as liberal, feminism, or we don't classify them as any group of feminism, right? So that's how I see the trade weapon movement. Yeah. Rogers?
I don't understand how the Chinese tradition divide the leader because I think that one was having that clarify the difference between leader rather than but I know what there is really not much difference between leader rather than the only difference is how they want to achieve their goal. Liberal feminism want to achieve equality through the existing framework of that. Radical feminism want to achieve equality by demolishing and destroying the existing framework of that. So you want to do it through something very unique. So I think from this presentation, while in the past we had in mind that liberal feminism is something negative, it really presents liberal feminism as something positive. The only problem being how they want they want to use bring about equality. They want to use a patriarchal framework of society to achieve equality in that program. While radical feminists want to demolish that entire system, create a new one based on equality. So I don't understand, I don't see how tradition works with equality.
Yeah, I agree with that one. So Ryan, we are together? Yeah. So I think the next question to remember is Terry's question, yeah, and connected to previous question. So I talked about the issue about Gen Z. Yeah, you can either you or Terry can reframe the question. Yes.
Based on what is really positive in liberal feminism that we can say because all we know that okay, I think the movement for a good time has focused on the process through which we reach to a conclusion rather than the conclusion. So if there is a miss within that within the process, how does it become a good thing? How does it become a good thing? And then you are going to say that the conservative, that is the conservative women. It's not like they are against women or something. But the principles of trade welfare, I don't know if it's me not understanding it well, but this is a section that really emphasizes a woman's role basically be you see the roles that we bearing children, cooking, and taking care of their husband, which becomes so hard if a woman really focuses on those plus their roles actually. Because if you also go back to the history of COVID, they were actually it looks like men are kind of becoming women as much because women according to that understanding, they were supposed to be at home, not basically. So how is it? How does it go hand in hand with what you're saying that they really are not against women when you want to connect it with the trade way?
Okay, so I think I'll respond, and also if Rogers wants to respond, will respond also. So I think we've talked about the first question is what is the good that you can see in referral, yeah? Feminism. So if I remember those studies that were done, as Rogers was saying, when you look at referral feminism, radical feminism, both of them want to achieve equality. Both of them, that's their agenda and focus. But how they want to achieve that one is now where it differs. One group wants to dismantle the entire system and achieve equality by destroying or the system. The other one wants to work within with the system. Yeah, working within the system and working with the system. That is how we understood. So previously, we were labeling referral feminism as something that is so negative. There is no good that can come out of the referral feminism. We focused only on radical feminism. But the recent studies showed that really radical feminism, referral feminism, there is no much difference, because the only difference that I think we said is how, when you look at even the history, the achievements, for example, abortion rights, it's the referral that achieved that, voting rights. So those are the goods that we can point about the referral feminism. So we can't sideline all of those achievements that the referral feminism has achieved for us. So we saw that it is the level that they can achieve. So the referral, by working with the system, they achieve, so they are limited, they achieve small, and compared with the entire system was to be destroyed. That's how I can respond to your first question. The second question is, you talked about midwifery, that it is not like they are against women working. So I would say one of their core value is promoting gender roles. It's either you as a woman, if you choose to work as your career, say you are a teacher, or you are whatever profession that you are, you choose to work. Remember, you are a woman. You emphasize these feminine characteristics. That is impressing your womanhood. So they don't care if you work or you don't work. It's you, whatever you choose. If I choose to work and care for my family and my husband, that's good. But if I leave my career and focus entirely on my family, they're not also against that. That's why I understand that. Roger, then I think we'll come to you to the first slide. Yeah.
And then the thing is talking about, like I thought it was the same, I think that point is the kind of two accounts. But we start to see that yes, we want to do what the impact on then I think that way you have
Okay, we can repeat there. So I was saying I have the second question. The second question, Reading, can ask it. Okay, right. Or Terry, you had the same question as Terry. So either one of you can ask. Okay. Oh, so I remember. So when I was doing the study, I said when you look at the Gen Zs, these are the group of people that are in for first. The question is, what is the relationship between Lean era and the Gen Z? So, and that's what I'm explaining when I was doing the study. I said this Gen Z, they are born in the time period when you have the internet period and when you have the feminism movement. I think the fragment of feminism movement. So, and I said, I pointed that as the real era of feminism. So that's what they're asking, what is the relationship between Gen Z and the lean era that I wrote it here. So how I was using the word lean in what was different from, I think, what Seko was explaining. Seko?
Yeah, sure.
So what I meant by them being born in the real era, Gen Z, is when you look at the Gen Z, I think also I have that question. So I think I can combine them with, I don't know whether it's nearly. I said the Gen Zs, when you look at them, statistically, it says that the Gen Zs are not concentrated or they're more progressive compared to the generations that the previous generations. So these are the progressive. So you can see progressive in terms of gender roles. I mean, they don't care much about gender roles compared to their previous counterpart, I would say. So, so how I use the word in era, I used it in connection moving towards this feminism. Yeah, so moving this towards feminism, trying to embrace this feminism, feminism ideologies. But I said, but you have a fraction of the far right Gen Zs that are countering that progression. I think that is how I use those words.
Okay, I think the reason why I asked the question is because you were talking about the pandemic. That is midway through. And I think we are doing that.
Yes, yes.
So why we have it? What is the relationship pertaining to the topic? That is where we want to discuss.
You can repeat your question.
The relationship between Gen Z and the need and the lean era, because the topic was about midwifery.
Yes.
So what is the relationship? Because this
How did Gen Z come in? Is that the question? Or
between the two? Because the one is about their progressive.
yes.
What about this other one? And why are you having them at the same time? Living okay. That is the relation. The new era.
So, and that's why I said the way I used the real era, the real in, not the era, is different from what Seko was saying. And I think what you are saying is what Seko was talking about. That's why you are connecting it with the pandemic. Okay, Seko?
I don't know whether I'm understanding our question on a different level, but our time is we are talking about, you talked about the lean era shortly after mentioning the period of COVID-19.
Okay.
So a concern is how does it get to this period? But now the response would be, when you mention the lean era, it was not, there is the lean era, which I knew fits in the period of the pandemic, a situation where everybody has to return home and things are undertaking a new control altogether. And men have to stay home, so there is a new a new norm, a new world order of things, which most men are not sitting well with. That is a lean era on its own. It fits within the pandemic period.
But again, the new era that we're talking about is the era within which this generation Z is born. And the generation that they are born in, they grow finding, or rather, they grow setting a new norm, which does not incline to the previous norms that they found, where they had gender roles and they had defined presumptions by the society based on how a woman should be perceived and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I think now I get what Lydia is saying. That since I remember during the Rhine, marked where we have the rise of this movement, Trade Week 2016. Then we talked about 2018, we talked about 2020. So 2020, this is when we have the high levels of this spread of this ideology of trade weaving. Then we gave the reasons why it is so. So before we gave the reasons, I took us through another waymark, an important waymark in our movement, which is November 9, 2019. So we also said this was not a waymark, rather it's because of my story, I saw it's important for us. So I marked November 17, 2019, which is we have COVID. Then I said, because of this, if you have COVID, then this is the impact of what we see here. So we see many people are at home, and we have these content creators. They are going to create the content surrounding what they are doing at home. So they are sharing their ideologies through the TikTok and other social media in this time period. So we have time. I remember people commenting about people being idle on that same space. So I finished that point. Then I was making a different point of Gen Z in progression. So I wanted to connect it with the period of COVID. That's why I told Seko, I'm not dealing with the green era that is having in the mind. Yeah. I think those are the two questions I remember. So was there any questions that were asked?
I have a question. The definition when you are defining feminism as the people and so I wasn't really understanding how it is put on the definition of feminism.
Okay, so when we look at feminism, we say feminism is this movement that is trying to establish or define the political, economic, social of equality between sexes and genders. I think genders. So that's why I added the acronym LGBTQ. Not only sexes, but also equality of all genders.
I think it's a new definition for me. In that the primitive definition of feminism.
Okay, I know there is that speaks of the rights of women. The feminism is the movement that fights for the rights of women. Full stop.
Is feminism equal to equality?
No?
What is the definition of equality?
Equality. Okay, let me.
Thinking that definition was near equality rather than
Feminism. But isn't feminism not the fight for equal rights for everybody? Yes.
It is, but it is limited. I think the
Limited to women rights? Okay, maybe we can start. So I'll have two people. I saw Grace, then Nick, Godson, then we'll finish there. Grace? Okay. So for those people that are online, so Grace is saying, so we are looking at the divination. I think the divination of feminism, where I think I included that the equality between plus LGBTQ, the ones that we know plus LGBTQ. So and the Grace is saying, reason why I included that she understands that it's because it includes the rights of minority. Okay, Nick, then Godson. Godson, you can go ahead.
Okay, so.
Huh? Oh no, I thought Nick said I think Godson should go first. That's what you said? Yes. The Godson then come to Nick.
Yeah, so, for me, the definition of feminism is as the type of human rights. But when you define women, you need to know that because when we define an individual lesbians are women, when it comes to transgender are women, when it comes to bisexual we are women. So that's the right of transgender women, that's the right of bisexual women, we have also the right of lesbians. But first I cannot see as women in this BC only the gay. But when I talk about rights, we have the right of all those sex from just the gay to the community. So if you say the rights of women, cannot
Okay. Nick? Oh, for those that are online, Godson is saying that you can't really separate women at the LGBTQ community except gays from women when we are talking about the rights of women. Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah. So Nick.
If you can understand that, so if they women right, then we can have it. So you have to say that right. So really women, so women should have right. So that is a kind of understanding without but when you are like family when you one by one the challenges
Okay, the last person is Georgia. So, wait.
And the problem with violence that actually includes sexual orientation. In that definition, how sexual orientation covers both people of sexual and sexual orientation. So I think if I remember, what are the things we do? When you have a distribution of somebody, you have the two of that distribution, when you give your two, will attend the two of that. For example, you found that a two that understand, there is. So we have, if you increase one, if you increase one, you can the polarization and then you see that in the so let's see the flow of nature. And when I see those time going back to when the people and green to see the road, we know to see that the root cause of homophobia is sexism. That I would think.
So for those that are online, Rogers is saying that in summary, that when we look at the dictionary definition of feminism, will give us specific on women. And also when you go to the outside divination statistics, if you go to internet, it includes gender. Now, when it comes to the movement, we've understood that you cannot separate the LGBTQ communities, because when you look at feminism, it includes the community. That's what project, what you say? Yeah. Yeah.
You just said as well, the region of the phobia is like.
Yeah, it's sexism, which is connected to the group. Yeah. So Irene, since you've not spoken today, so I will give you as a special. I was supposed there. So Irene.
Okay, I think I was agree with the one for that where both is and then from maybe online by Googling. So even when we want to investigate the one feminism, we can borrow it from feminine or female. And then use have to be a like how then we say feminism is struggle for equality for gender. And yes, it's a enlightenment the other gender. But we also understand and recognize that already the society we live in patriarchal. Men are already elected. So we for them, women. So like when we come to like there is a we can go into the dictionary and say it is women who are already done
Oppressed.
who are then
But that does not mean you exclude others.
exactly.
Okay. So Irene is saying that when you look at from the word itself, it's a feminine word, feminism. So focusing on the women, but that doesn't mean that you are excluding those other groups that are being oppressed. So I think the question I will finish there. Sorry, Deng, I said that will, I think we have exhausted the question, right? The rest we can discuss. So I said the rest we can discuss. What? Another question.
On the thing, I'm saying this, the whole of the
Nick.
So I just want to understand, because there is this, when we talk about the one that's bigger. We are for one movement. We like it, we are particularly people who come younger. We are not, because when we talk about LGBT, lesbians, and then lesbians are on the side of women, and then gay are men. So lesbians are being affected by what like that is being decided because they are women. Trans women are also being affected. Trans are also being affected by women. And gain are benefiting from what? Budget. So in that case, it is gender equality that is used, okay, the rule education, but not feminism. That is the only clarification that I will do. Gender equality is the rule of what feminism is group is funds. And that's why the arrangement fund that is
Okay, thank you. So, I think maybe Shane, you are a follow-up question for him. So that's a follow-up question to him, yeah? So we can discuss it. Should I give them time? Follow-up. Oh, yeah. So if it's a question, can we tackle it tomorrow? Or the other presenters have questions too? We can discuss it later. I think those were the questions that I had. Yeah. Unless any new questions you can write down, we will tackle it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I had 3 questions now. I've only just been given a couple of them. So okay, so the first question was about the first presentation, and it was regarding Daniel 12:3. So the person said, repeat and enlarge, compare and contrast, they, that, etc. Clarify on what or how this works, and then they put language, state of being, action, doing. I'm afraid I might have confused people with the language, action, and being. That wasn't so important for the point. I think for me, what I'm picking up is you're asking, how do we do this repeat and enlarge and compare and contrast? For me, I think with repeat and enlarge, we're looking for the same concept or the same words. And that what I saw in the verse were the same words and the same concept. So we had they done, and that was repeated. So you've got 2 words that are repeated that start a sentence. And that often happens with repeating their lunge. So it says, the Lord will do this, and God will also do this, something like that. So it starts the same with the same words or the same label for something slightly differently written, or they can pick up the same concept. So you've got the repeat of the exact words, they, that, and they, that. And then you've got the same concept. So you've got be wise. And we see that as something positive. And then when we see turn many to righteousness, just doing this from memory, I haven't got the verse. Okay. So I think when you're reading, you're looking for similar concepts being repeated and similar words. So they that be wise, oh sorry, it's they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, they that turn many to righteousness. So to me, that's not exactly obvious because I'm not sure what wise means. And then it says turn many to righteousness. I can see that turning people to righteousness is a good thing. Being wise is a good thing. So we can see it's 2 good things. And I think that's the benefit of repeating and enlarge. You're not quite sure there, perhaps, if this is repeating and enlarge. Is it saying the same thing? Is it trying to tell us something different? But then you get to the next bit, and to me, that's what you pick up as well. So you've got they that repeats exactly, but you've also got this concept of shining, brightness, and firmament. So you're seeing shining, brightness, and firmament, which is the sky. And then in the next part, you've got they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. So you can see the concept of stars, but they shine in the firmament. So there's a connection there, it's the same kind of picture language. Stars forever and ever. And then you could say, that's harder to see perhaps, but firmament is, as we said, the sky is expansive. It seems to go on forever and ever. There's no end to the sky. So you can see a similar concept of stars shining in the sky, but also practicing firmament ever and ever. So you can see that this is very much the same concept, and it's repeating, and that's repeating. And then that enables you to say, okay, let's compare these 2 and learn what it means to be wise. And then let's interrogate what it means to be like a star and shine. What does it mean? So it's giving you more information about what wise is, and be turning men into righteousness, you're wise, and what those stars, how they shine, and what that means. That was very quick. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure if there was more behind that question. I don't know whose question it was, but did anyone else have any comments or thoughts about that? I was going to use another verse. Psalm 19 is a really nice one to do this with. You want to do it yourself. I think we've done this in the movement years ago. If you look at Psalm 19, especially verses 7 to 9. I won't do it here, but I'll just give you, it's just the same kind of concept repeated over again. So it says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure. So it tells you something about the law of the Lord, and that it's perfect. And then it tells you what it does. So it tells you how good the thing is, and then what it does. And then it says the testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. So again, it tells you how solid it is, how good it is, and then what it's going to do. It's going to make the simple wise. Then it says the statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. So you can see it's constantly repeating this idea of something that is a characteristic of God, how it's good, and then what it's going to do. And then you can compare those things. And if you want to find out what does it mean to make the wise simple, then you compare the other concepts in the other verses, and you get more of an understanding of what it means for the simple to be wise, making wise the simple. So that's a really good one to go through and just compare and contrast and say the law, the statutes, that all those things, what do they do for the person? So, and I think it's not always that straightforward, but if we can start looking at verses ourselves and comparing and contrasting them and seeing if there's a repeat in life or a chiasm. Chiasm's another one to look for, where you have the A, B, B, A. The more you do that, the more you'll start seeing things that you didn't see before, I think, and it's a really neat way of studying. So the other two questions I had, the second one was, the stone destroys the kingdoms. Every successive kingdom destroyed the former kingdoms, harmonized. So I think what this is saying is, the stone is going to destroy all the kingdoms. So we've got the whole image. My image is getting worse and worse. Okay, so the stone's going to destroy the whole image. And the person's making the point that each kingdom took over from the one before. So if we look at that, we know that Medo-Persia took over from Babylon. So Babylon is destroyed by Medo-Persia. So the next kingdom destroyed the last one. I think it still fits in Daniel 2. So we can look at it two ways. One is the stone hits the feet of the image, which is the fourth kingdom. It's the last kingdom. It's the last portion of the fourth kingdom. So it's the last bit of the last kingdom. And so in that sense, it does follow the same pattern, I think, that it does destroy the previous kingdom, which in this history, in this image, is the last kingdom of the world. So that's the time that this stone is going to hit. It's going to take out this little world. But as we've been looking at the whole image, and we see the ideology and the connection between the Alpha and Omega, Babylon, it's all Babylon. In one level, it's all Babylon. It's all the same ideology and philosophy that's passed through. It's destroying the whole thing, not just the last bit of it, because it's giving us confidence that this ideology that's followed through in the world is going to be completely destroyed. It's not just about that last kingdom. It's about the whole thing that Satan's been doing down through the ages that's going to get completely wiped out, not rise up again. And I think that's an important point, because it's the ideology behind this that's we're dealing with. So I don't know if there's more to that question. Does anybody want to? Yeah.
The question was actually mine.
Okay.
So if we see the transition between the kingdoms, moving from Babylon to Medo-Persia, and I think the language of Daniel says that the stone destroys the kingdom, right? That means it is not only a specific one from the seal stone.
That means it's going to, it says kingdoms, but that means
Yeah, it is more than one.
it's more than one. Okay.
Right? I would assume so. So if we get to the explanation you're giving, and you're saying that the stone hits the feet, Ain't it going for a specific kingdom? And what does the destruction that is made of the stone, how does the destruction that is made of the stone differ with the destruction that is made by the successive kingdoms?
Okay, that's two questions, I think. So I think you're saying the first, I guess the first question is, it hits, even though it hits in the fourth kingdom, it actually says kingdom, but it's going to destroy. Why is it plural? And I think this is connected to the days of these kings. Why is it these kings when there's only one king in existence in the fourth kingdom? You know, that time in the world, it's going to hit that point. Then it's the time of the fourth kingdom. So why does it say in the days of all these kings? And I think that tension is what we've been exploring in the last class, with the fact that all these kingdoms still exist in one level. So Daniel's trying to show us one thing, that they have to have their dominion taken away, as it said in Daniel 7. So they've passed off the scene, but their spirit or their ideology still exists. So it's being carried on. So in that sense, all these things are still around at the end of the world because their ideology is embodied in the whole thing. And so, and because we're in an information war, I think this is an important point, that God is saying it's not good enough to wipe out the physical kingdom if the ideology is continuing in the people that still exist. So God's saying we need to, in this information war, nobody with that ideology will rise up a second time in the new kingdom. And we need that assurance, because if another Trump rises up in heaven, it's going to be a disaster. So we need to have that confidence that the ideology is not going to exist past that point. So this stone has to smash the whole thing, because it's symbolizing an ideology, not just a physical, literal kingdom. So I think it's all connected to the idea of these things. In the days of these kings, why is it kings plural? It's because all their ideologies still exist in the final amalgamation books in Revelation 13. Okay. And then the second part of your question, what was that?
You've answered.
I've answered it. Okay, that's good. Forgot what it was. Okay, so the third question is, this is an interesting question. Everyone can help me with this one, because we might have different opinions. It says, based on the foreknowledge of successive kingdoms of Daniel 2, knowing that Medo-Persia, Greece explicitly beforehand, does it mean God knows immutably certain future, or due to high precision that the reason is the reason? So does he really know, does God really know what's going to happen from kingdom to kingdom? Or is it just that they've got a lot of knowledge, and so can guess it pretty accurately, that with such high precision that we know it's going to happen? So I think the verses I'd take us to are probably Isaiah 46, 9 and 10, which we know in this movement quite well. We've used it for a long while, and the fact that Christ is Alpha and Omega. I thought I had it up here, sorry, I haven't got it up here. I used to know it by heart. So Isaiah 46, 9 and 10. And then Revelation, where it said Christ is Alpha and Omega. Let's read this one first. Remembering the former things of old, for I am God and there is none else. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will do all my pleasure. So this is one of the foremost verses we use to say that God knows the end from the beginning. And I think behind this question is predestination. And this is a question that's troubled Christians down through the ages. So God knows the end from the beginning, because God is Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, and uses the beginning to illustrate the end. And that's what prophecy is, that in one level, God knows what's going to happen and tells us in advance. That's the traditional definition of prophecy. So the question is, in what detail does God know that? So on a political level, God knew that these kingdoms would do this. And then on a personal level, does God know what we're going to do? And I think this is connected to predestination. Predestination, there are people in Christianity who believe that we're predestined to a certain role. So we're born to be saved or lost, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's the extreme, I think it's Calvinism. But they believe that it doesn't matter what you do, almost, your lifestyle, how you live, you're already predestined or predetermined to be saved or lost, because they're reading those scriptures about predestination in that way. There's a lot of things that don't make sense about that, but I think we as Adventists believe that God has foreknowledge, so God knows in advance what's going to happen, but God doesn't make it happen. So if you're a parent, you can probably pretty much predict how your child is going to behave in certain circumstances. So we have a degree of that once we know someone really well, or a spouse, or a brother or sister. If you know someone really well, you can almost, people start saying, we think the same, or we finish each other's sentences. So there's an element, even with us humans, that we can almost predict what someone's going to do or say when we know them very well. So that's not that difficult. I suppose on a bigger scale, it's the kingdoms. How did God know that all this was actually, that these people who are not following God were going to do these things, or didn't make them do it, but knew they were going to do it? I think for me, I think God knows everything that's going to happen, but that doesn't mean that God makes people choose. So God knows exactly right now whether we'll be lost or saved, each one of us, but is constantly working to bring us into closer relationship with themselves all the time. And that in that process, there's always hope right to the end, even though God knows what's going to happen. Does anybody want to add any thoughts to that? What's hands? Rogers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So God knows what to do in but cannot make it happen because we work.
Yeah.
For example, when you read the sea, the way sea is coming to the plan of the devil was not an afterthought. It will take place. But God did it to change the sea.
Yes.
God foresaw that it may exist, put a plan in place, when the month that plan had to be executed. Lucifer was confronted with the death and passed the test. That plan was made good. Never been so I think that as much as God knows, and I think the result of I had a study we because because of the audience stuff, but environment in this something bigger to them. That's what we do for the so God knows what we but our questions are not. I think that we are coming our way back. What happens from them? So we have a
So Rogers is making the point that based on our study of the nature of humanity, we know that there's divinity and humanity combined. So God knows what's going to happen, but we have a part to play in choosing the right or what's going to happen. So it's our choice that's going to determine the outcome of events, even though God knows what's going to happen. And I just mentioned something else. I remember everything he said. The Laodicean church, yeah. What's the point? It's an example of it. So God tells us the state of the church, but it's up to us to determine, I guess, how we choose to behave in this history, whether we'll be successful or not, whether we can change that condition, I suppose. Yes, David.
What I want to say regarding the relationship
No. God has made us in such a way that we should we're able to choose, yeah, that we're not predestined.
And that's why when we look at the history of the family and the family, the issue has to go and try to people that the beauty of family, or just one of the people that you talk about in mind and family.
Yes.
The whole time we're trying to change over.
Yeah.
So that means that there was a way people were going to change over. What was spoken by God. So what has come down to what we feel effect. Yeah. So you know, like, don't think we have to do something about it because we are don't think that now that we don't find the wisdom. There's another power which is trying to say which was that we want to find the time very quickly. You can see a history of people. People have tried to unite it, but it was a same problem. So it was bound to fail. So the way I see it like this. So everyone is looking for us. Probably you're going to heaven. Like really, it was big. You're probably going to heaven. You're probably going to being done, going to let's say being destroyed. So as a human being,
You have their goal. Go see two things for you. You think that when you attend the message, this is the way you go. If you reject, you'll be like me. So these are the two things. Just like if you are going somewhere for long distance, you know that one of the dials might pass. What you have to do, you have to try high. So the way I think that.
Well, that's very.
And so I think that every story every day, but if I increase your chances of either affecting God or the chances, very much who affect the influence you have on mind. So who are not human, don't say that I did not learn from the beginning. It is not individual thing, it is a system of nature. So like how do you define it? That's why the mind can have to calm down. And very sure that the people of that decide that are able to keep properly. So that is on a larger scale, on the kingdom on earth, it's not individual. So for individuals, it is within your hand.
So David's making a distinction between the nations and the individuals. So the nations, these prophecies are about the nations, but it's up to the individual how they choose. I would challenge that slightly because Nebuchadnezzar is an individual and it's all based on what he's going to do on this kingdom. So in that sense, it's an individual fight. But David's point, I think, more so was that we're not predestined, that we have the power to choose, and that it's up to us to choose who's going to be influencing our life, whether it's God or Satan, and then we choose to be prepared in that journey. So you mentioned about taking a spare tire if we're going on a long journey. There's that all about preparation, that the choices we make are all up to us and our preparation. It's not, and yet God can see what we're going to do. I think it works the same in the nations. So even though you said, I think you made the point that Antigonus, he was never going to win because he wouldn't fulfill prophecy then. And it's kind of like chicken and egg. God knows what's going to happen and prophesies it's going to happen. Does that mean these people are now forced to do it by God? Because we know that they're going to choose to do it. And because he could see that we're going to choose to do it, or God could see that we're going to choose to do it, God wrote it down. This is what they're going to do, even though they themselves didn't even realize that's what they were going to do. And even showing them that God had written that, like the Bible actually helped him to do what he was supposed to do. So Daniel says, there's a prophecy here about you. 150 years ago, it said you're going to let those people, or you were going to take down Babylon. And that must have done something to Cyrus's faith to see that. I still think that God knows all this, but doesn't make it happen. Does that cause more questions? John, Nick.
I think that we should look at how we have to understand what we mean. Really, God understands the things in the way. God can see that asking about breaking this thing maybe related and the intervention is there and trying to make it. That's the position. Like really, you are saying those are the same particular level that God has told us, but that is done that conclusion.
So Nick's just clarifying, I just want to repeat before I forget what you're saying. Nick's just clarifying that he thinks my position, or what I'm saying is that God can see the end from the beginning, and that all these things that God prophesies are, I think use the word immutable. Does immutable mean unchangeable? So on one level, I think it depends how you're using that. So it's not going to change. So in that sense, it isn't immutable, but it doesn't mean that people don't have choice, that they could change it if they wanted to, but ultimately God knows they're not going to, even though he gives opportunity after opportunity. Look at Nebuchadnezzar, at least 3 opportunities with Daniel in the court to be converted and to change the course of history. And we know even then that God would have adapted to that if they had changed it. So we know prophecy is conditional, but God still sees those are the choices they're going to make. So like Jonah comes and says, repent, or the city will be destroyed. And God had full intention to do that, but they repented, so then God didn't to do that. So there is a cause and effect, and there is a condition to those prophecies, I think, but God knows that that's still going to happen. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering what's behind the question. He wants to express his position now. Go. Debate in where? Catholicism. Calvinism, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Protestantism.
So what I think when you go to Daniel, and God is really directly. Maybe God is very familiar with family. I think the family we are today, and when the part will come, explicitly starting and please will come. So God is starting at a place that those history that never happened. His kingdom is first in his country. But I understand why God spoke at that three. But I think I say, why is God not saying the boat is thrown somewhere speaking to those parties? Maybe I can maybe the revelation of Daniel, the 17, because we are just going to create as well, or going to animals and then leave the video and then maybe get another country will throw with bubble and then we go what we call it. Like what I'm saying is why God stopped at number 3 to me be not that God directly to certain that what we see like the part of the will come into play or free, but God is what they talk about as of same rate of power. But I think God has passed only what information and can see what probability to be there. Hundreds of billions and have said we can be put overboard and can mention that the Roberto will be the next based on other understanding. We that we are going to be like we have seen the Roberto will come, but it's like what they are seeing probability 99%, or I think the Roberto will come. But it's like the same way when it comes to a human life, I've got to know whether we will succeed to be living or not. It's the same thing. I'm saying my answer is like, God, I'm saying things like doesn't really understand certain that we will be living, but God understands all probability of the choices and I mentioned that, look, I see that rotation will appear then. So basically human choices typically could be in theory, it could change. In the report that the one, we know that it could change in theory, but the fact that it couldn't actually come.
So I think what Nick is saying is that his view at this point is that it's based on the fact that God knows human nature and it's more probability. So it's a 99% probability that this will happen, that Medo-Persia will come, even though God doesn't know 100% because human choice is involved. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in Medo-Persia, what they say, why God mentioned Medo-Persia, when we are studying Babylon, those nations who call Medo-Persia, we are here to say that Rome existed at that time. When we are talking about Babylon, Rome existed by God, not specific in application of prophecy, because prophecy is coming into see it most probably when they are interaction with God, that will be the part of because they are giving to the God. So most of these kingdoms are connected to the and the United States will have a perspective in Quebec in that world. So I think why God should see that the part and Greece, in my opinion, that mentioned in Rome is because those powers are next to the world. What is the way that we say in China in superpower that basically they see how the water going to and water. So at that point, we have also that information that God also understood.
Okay. So you're basically saying that God knows 99% because of their understanding of humanity. Okay, just hold on a minute. Share your thoughts quickly if you've got any. I'm not sure why that makes you feel better than thinking God knows 100%. I'm not sure what that does for you in the sense that
That 0.1%.
does it
Theoretically,
so leaving that so leaving the one
Really think those are directly so they go try to get that
I did not see that there was. I think what you're saying is that the 1% gives you confidence that human beings have still got choice, that we've got wiggle room to change the situation if we're on a path of what looks like destruction. We've got wiggle room to change it. I'm going to question that. I'm going to challenge that and say, for me, it gives me absolute confidence in God that God knows the end from the beginning. God knows exactly what's going to happen. And I think one of the ways I can process that is we're so bound by time. Time is really important to us. And it is to God on one level, because God's a wonderful numberer and gives us these time prophecies, which no human being could possibly fulfill. You know, that down to the day that Christ is going to be crucified, anointed, etc., the whole 70 weeks. A lot of those time prophecies to us, and even predicting in advance what kingdoms are going to do, is mind-blowing to us. Because we think, how does anybody individual know that that is exactly what's going to happen? And I think because it's time-bound, and I think if we can step back and see, I don't know, this is just maybe a theory, that God doesn't exist in time, because God was everlasting, from everlasting to everlasting. Now, we know it's easy once we've gone through the time to look back and say, oh, well, Medo-Persia ruled for this long. It's absolutely obvious once you've gone through it. So perhaps God has already gone through all this, one level, mentally, because they're from the end from the beginning. They know the end from the beginning. They know everything that's going to happen and has happened and will happen all at once, almost. So if they're there, then it's easy for them to look back and say, well, this is going to happen. And it doesn't mean that we haven't got choice to change it on one level, because it's not going to change if God says that's what's going to happen. But it's not because God's making it happen. It's just that God knows. And I think that's the tension. Because it says in Revelation 19:6 that God is omnipotent, which means all powerful. And I think that all powerful embraces the fact that they're omniscient, we say omnipresent, omniscient, all knowing, all present, and all knowledgeable. I don't know if Ellen White says that, and whether that's just a Christian concept, because I was trying to find, I haven't had a chance to look for the passages. But Ellen White has quite a few times says God knows the end from the beginning. I'd recommend you research that frame. In Spirit of Prophecy, and just look up end beginning and God knows something. And there's quite a lot of passages where he can say God knows a lot. I'm not sure we're going to fully understand that because we're finite and we don't see what God sees. So it's hard for us to grasp that God can see what we can't see. Italo, that's something like.
Thank you. I think when I see the study the next of humanity, must have different ways of evidence to answer a lot of problems that we have. And if we don't get into line with the study the next of humanity, the kind of random understand that right now in terms of one way flow, I think we will end up into the blame. We will blame God for what and we will blame ourselves. For example, God says, we saw the quotation that was read that God saw the existence of the sin, but it was not an invitation that we have to work in the sin. So you have Adam and Eve Eden, they are sinning against God. When you ask them why you sin, what do you say? Because if God is controlling you what? Existing. So like you can just blame God like you say, it doesn't sin. But they compare that God gave them the capability that not work. For seeing,
Not seeing him.
so there is a quotation from the science of the time. And it says that the whole of nation and individual through their own control action. And if you try those words, the whole of nation and individual becomes the book of Daniel. Because the quotation of the moment, I think
Yes.
part of the sound.
Prophet Kings, by Rowan, yeah.
This nation, they never have a foundation for another nation if they have glorified God. They have lived they have other than the most of them, they are not sure what is not there's no God as the sea. For example, look at the in that case, given a feeling of the transition of God, you use this farm. And when you store that, here to believe those stories, and yet the power to change and do good that we avoid this transition. And according to him, in chapter 3, he sets up Christ by setting the whole image of the world to God. Telling God, we are not doing what he's going to allow you to transition. Because God is definitely going to be a transition. But according to him, it's not actually that this is broken. What is just transition? Why am I moving from Babylon to Zimbabwe? And if you did a reason properly, you have recognized that this transition is caused because of our wickedness. And if there is so much wickedness in our nation, individually, so many things that are happening. You see that in the transition, you see that nobody has seen us.
He might have said, the God of heaven has said these things are going to happen, therefore I can't do anything about it. And now I'm trying to stop it in my own strength by building the image. What he should have done is gone to Daniel and said, what can I do about this? So ask the prophet of God who's told me the dream, what can I do to stop this? So just to repeat Itabo's point for the online, I don't know if they can hear it, but I was making the point that we really need to understand the nature of humanity and how that works, and fast brain and slow brain, and otherwise we'll end up in a blame game between us and God, as Adam and Eve did. You know, it's why did they sin? Is it because God knew that and saw that sin would happen? No, it's because they then chose to sin, and then they blamed each other and God for that sin. So then he was making the point about the nations, that just like nations had warnings, and what was the point about the nations? 501 this morning. But yeah, they had choices, that the reason why they passed off the scene is because they're not faithful to God, just like individuals. They've still got a choice, and that they would have lasted forever if they'd been faithful to God. It was never God's will that these nations be apostate. It was God's will that Israel be glorious and then fill the world with glory. And then when that failed, took Israel to Babylon to fill Babylon with glory so they could do plan B with Babylon. Babylon fails me. So this crown keeps getting passed, as Alan White and Ezekiel, I think it is, where it says overthrow, overthrow. The crown keeps getting passed from Israel to Babylon to Budapest, when it will finally go back to God's kingdom, because God has always wanted a kingdom of equality on earth. And that's what was trying to set up all from day one. Sin was never the plan. So it's always been the default. And people, individuals and nations can choose whether they are faithful to God or not, even though God could see ultimately that was going to happen. Yeah. Lots of plans. Okay, we're running out of time. We've run out of time. Yeah. So I'll just take Philip and Dennis. I don't know anyone else have a hand in the middle. Speak up, Philip.
I think you understand the approach very well, and I think the more we can about
About
philosophy.
philosophy. Okay.
And more really.
And
But when you two paragraphs, I don't put them part of the 195. Now, when you go to Bible, you find that the children of Israel are removed from Egypt. God was leading them by day to the clouds, and by night to the fire.
yes.
So that you can use as a parables, right? The reason why God has to go before human being, okay, is so that bring a lesson to human being and to others. It's like, let me say, organization. Organize the human family and make them ready, okay, for what they're doing. So the manifestation is meant for the future. Now God will go into the future faster than human being and come out of human being and say, make it a prophecy and say the world is going like this. Okay, so, and then you will find a different story, and that story that just not inform this, or not inform the human being, not allow human being to go before. That is the powerful destination. Another one that I will give is the shift in the vast unstable amount of water. Shift in the water. There is always this mechanism or system that is embedded in the ship, okay, that will allow the ship to find the direction.
Yeah.
Because literally, when you are standing in the ship, you cannot see you are in the sea. You cannot see the end.
Yeah.
Okay. This system is going to what? It's going before the ship, going fast to find what? The direction. Okay. This is if these things are found in the literal story in the world, why do you think the God who is a creator cannot go into the future and what and give us the information that will be in the future? So that's what I have to.
So Philip's saying that use two illustrations, one of a ship at sea who's got instruments to navigate forward because they can't see, and the one of the Israelites in the wilderness, that the pillar of fire that directs them by night and the cloud by day, that God is one step ahead, goes into the future and comes back to tell us so that we know which way to go. And when it says, we follow the Lamb whithersoever Jesus goeth, that if God doesn't know where they're going, why would we follow them? So that this idea that God knows where we're going and tells us that to give us confidence that we can trust God to follow. I think, I'm sorry, Dennis.
Okay, so we have just simple explanation. And I think what was coming to my mind is concept of being an observer and an actor. And this takes me to a play like drama. And what I tend to see is like the history of these universes is like that play. And God knows the script from the beginning to the end. But God has not chosen players that it is actually Nebuchadnezzar who should fulfill this role, or it is Cyrus who should fulfill this role. But as human beings, understanding the same concept as we are taught in the movement, that we are actors and observers, and in the perspective of actors, that sometimes we do things, understanding from the nature of humanity that it is through our will, no one forces us to do these things. And those things that we do, we end up fulfilling prophecy in a way. Like it might sound as a simple thing, as a small thing, but in the prophetic world, it has some impact. And I remember in the morning class, you were saying that the nations, based on the quote you were reading, they need to understand about the future or about prophecy. And this was something that came to my mind about Cyrus. Cyrus knows his job description, but it's Daniel who is actually there to tell Cyrus that your work or job description is to set God's people free. So, and you can see a conflict in Cyrus' mind, where he's willing to reluctantly do it.
Yes.
Not that God is forcing him to do it.
He had a choice.
He had a choice.
Even though it's prophesied.
Exactly. He was prophesied,
Yeah.
but Cyrus has to make a choice independently. Do I set them free or do I not? And I tend to think God had not actually controlled Cyrus' mind to do it. Though Gabriel says Michael came to help me, but I don't think they actually manipulated Sarah's mind to actually or force it to do it. Had to make an independent choice.
Yes.
And I tend to think it's the same for the kingdoms. God knows the script, that it's like a path. I know where the potholes are, I know where the valleys are, I know where the hills are. And God foresees and tries to warn us that don't get past this path. Up there is something bad. And we have to make a choice, or we have to make a way out to navigate ourselves to get to the end. And because this is a play where it is a controversy, we also need to realize that there is another force working on the other side that is also trying to influence our decision making. And I tend to think these kingdoms, we can mark good things that Nebuchadnezzar did and bad things that Nebuchadnezzar did. Good things that Cyrus did, good things that bad things that Cyrus did. And it's because it is the controversy. Satan wants the script to go against God's will. And God is working to make the script go according to his own way. So I tend to think God knows everything, but the decisions we make is on our own hands, understanding the nature of humanity. And because the script is written,
this history has to end this way. There are people who fall, or their nations will fall in the category to fulfill prophecy in the negative perspective, and they are not going to fulfill in the positive perspective. All I would say, someone has to fulfill it, but it is not inscripted that it is this specific person.
Except
Based on
Cyrus.
based on the story, based on the two principalities,
Yeah.
we can make right or wrong decisions.
Absolutely. I think on the back of that, that we know this is a movement of success, but it's up to us individually whether we choose to be part of that success or not. So each one of us can still fail on one level. But we'll focus on the success part. Let's pray. Thank you for your time. Our dear loving God, we have gathered here together at this camp meeting because it's our desire to know you and to know what the truth is about you and your kingdom and what our part in that is. Help us to be faithful students of prophecy. Help us to rejoice that we can know these things and that you have given us much light. Thank you for the privilege of being here together, and please give us a blessing now, give us a good night's rest, be with those online and bring us all safely back together again tomorrow. We thank you now and we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.